Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to today's FIDIC webinar, Around the World in 90 Minutes, Changes and Future Trends in the Delivery of Consulting Engineering Services. I'm Luis Villarroya, board member and vice president of FIDIC, and first liaison of the FLC with the FIDIC board. To manage and coordinate this webinar today with us, we have to Adam Biajalowski, chair of the FLC and CEO of Vintage Consulting in Poland, and to Rodrigo Juarez, vice chair of the FLC and senior consultant in FOA Consultant in Mexico. Today's event has been organized by the FIDIC Future Leader Advisory Council. The council does a great job engaging with future leaders in the consultancy and engineering sector to promote FIDIC activities. The council also works with FIDIC to create targeted activities of interest for future leaders. Today's event is a special one as it will offer a unique and hopefully a revealing glimpse into the future of the consultant engineering industry through the insights of the young professionals that will shape it over the coming years. Our webinar today is part of the FIDIC's 2022 series of events, which we organize to help keep our industry updated and informed on the key issues that we all face. As well as our committee webinar series, we have the FIDIC State of the World program and also our flagship FIDIC Annual Global Infrastructure Conference, which this year makes a welcome return as an in-person event when we all meet up in Geneva from 11 to 13 September 2022. So please put the day in your diary as we really look forward to welcoming you in Switzerland for what should be a must-attend event for everyone working in the construction and infrastructure sector. But let's back to our today's webinar. The truth is that I am the most grateful to participate in this event because seeing the average age of our speakers, I feel deeply honored with this invitation. The world is changing at a breakneck speed. And if it has been already something that has been happening for a long time, the effects of the pandemic have only accelerated all the transformation processes. It's not that the COVID crisis has brought these situations of change, but what it's generated is that all changes that we were envisaging have accelerated extraordinarily. And this is where those of us who comb gray hair have problems. It is more difficult as seniors to adapt to changes at the necessary speed. And not to mention the situations to which it is difficult for us to adapt because deep down, we don't understand them. This is why the importance of listening to our young people, listening and paying attention today. They understand perfectly what is happening. It seems natural to them. What's more, they are part of the group that is driving the change, and in any case, their ability for adaptation is very high. For young people, this lack of resistance to change not only makes it easier for them to adapt to the new reality, but also allows them to see what is going to happen in the future. That's for the usefulness of this webinar. Our young people are the leaders of the future, the ones who will define what our world and our industry will be like. And hearing in advance what they want to do is a gift. Our international lineup of speakers today comprises future leaders from Brazil, Mexico, Kenya, Poland, Denmark, Canada, and Japan, a truly international lineup. During the next 90 minutes, we will have the opportunity to take a tour from one corner of the world to another and hear the opinion of the FLC members about sustainability and climate change, digital transformation, diversity and inclusion, and the new social contract model. The FLC members will give us their opinion on these issues from the perspective of their geographical location and with the freshness of their time and with an optic without any predefined idea. For the new generations, and especially for those who will be the leaders, these future drivers are part of their priorities and main concerns. As engineers, we have a fundamental role in achieving the objectives of sustainability and climate change. From FIDIC, as well from other regional federations and member associations, we have made position statements on these issues. However, we question whether what has been done so far is enough. And above all, we question whether the group of engineering professionals have internalized and assumed the importance of the situation and the obligation that documents such as the FIDIC's Climate Change Charter means for all of us. My hope is that our young people will be the first to promote all the proposed measures because they are indeed, to a great extent, the generators of those measures. In the same sense, digital transformation acquires an absolutely natural dimension for them. For our young people, this is not a transformation because the use of new technologies is the natural environment in which they have grown up, and they are fully prepared for the use, and even for its improvement. The resistance to change to all the new processes and systems is non-existent. The same could be said about diversity and inclusion. Our young leaders at the generation of globalization must have traveled, speak several languages, and have grown up in a multicultural and multiracial environment. This led to gender barriers. For them, are non-existent or much lower than those of previous generations. Not able to predict how they will interpret the company, work, private life relationship. But what I'm totally sure is that it will be a total break with the current model of social contract. The priorities of the young people have completely changed, and the impact that all this will have on the roles of the company-employee relationship will be very important. So let's make way for the young people. They will now tell us the way they see these issues, which predicts what their future evolution will be, because they are the ones designated to lead the change. I hope that all the information we are going to receive is for your interest, and now enjoy what I'm sure will be a great webinar. And that's all from my part. So please, Rodrigo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your really kind words, Luis. First of all, from everyone here at the Future Leaders Advisory Council, we would really like to thank FIDIC for the support that they constantly provide us. It's great to have your participation as the Vice Chair of FIDIC in our webinars, because it really does show the commitment that FIDIC has in supporting the activities that we in the Future Leaders Advisory Council do. And that it's a, let's say, a relationship that you support us, we support you into, well, with the hope of making the consulting engineering industry better for us, because it's what we do, what we like to do, and hopefully we can get into the right track. So thank you very much for that. So thanks everyone for joining. As Luis was saying, I'm Rodrigo Juarez, I'm from Mexico. I'm the Vice Chair of the Future Leaders Advisory Council. And we have prepared this webinar for all of you into what we think are some of the most important trends and subjects or topics that the consulting engineering industry is facing. Of course, we like to talk about some topics that are particularly relevant for the reality that we are living right now, such as technology, digital disruption, climate change. But also we like to discuss or talk about some topics that are not widely discussed. We like to create some discussions, some thought-provoking ideas, and perhaps also discuss some topics that are not entirely, I would say, regular. We like to talk about topics that might be uncomfortable sometimes, but this is because it's the reality that we are living. It's something that, as Luis was saying, we might be used to them because it's our reality, but it's something that is also the trend that we are going to, and that has changed the way that we have been living and practicing the consulting engineering. So thanks everyone again for joining. We are fortunate to count with the participation of a very diverse group of great consulting engineers from around the world. We have the participation of Nilan Parbu, Mats Brands Rasmussen, Arthur Brito, Michael Walker, Masao Yamakawa, and Adam Belakowski, the chair of our council, who will also be providing you with some very interesting insights at the end of the session. So thank you everyone for joining. We would like to post a first poll question, which is now being shown on the screen. We want to know, has the way of conducting business in the last 2 years impacted your relationships with work associates? We're gonna give you a few seconds to respond.
Just showing poll question 2, Rodrigo.
Yeah, Liz, could you show the question 1, please? Because it showed question 2.
There we
Yes.
go. Perfect.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, just a few more seconds for the responses. So we've seen that about 82% of our respondents say that their work of conducting business has been definitely impacted over the last 2 years. Only 18% have said no, and perhaps our speakers will be able to explain why this has happened, why it hasn't happened, and where we are trending to. So with that, I would just like to introduce our first speaker, Nilan Parbu from South Africa. She's gonna give us her perspective. So please, Nilan, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo, and good afternoon to everyone. So today I thought I'd share some insights that relate to the trends that we are seeing in the consulting sector in South Africa with regards to tech in our projects, people and how things have changed, and also considering future prospects. So in terms of our projects, the past year in South Africa was really challenging. Our economy struggled to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent global lockdowns. However, the first quarter of 2022 brings some hope for us. We saw a growth rate of about 2% of our economy, which was largely attributed to the high commodity prices. Our government has announced plans to embark on massive infrastructure drive to try and revive our economy, with about 2.3 trillion rands promised over the next trillion rands in projects promised over the next 10 years, which is about 145 billion US dollars. However, consulting and even construction firms are a bit concerned of the pace at which these projects are being awarded and rolled out. With the current lack of availability of work in our sector, our tendering or bidding processes have become highly competitive. And in response to this, companies are now turning to technology to try and make our daily operations more efficient, to try and save on our project costs, and also to encourage innovation. Through a recent survey that we've completed with Consulting Engineers South Africa, we found that 63% of our member firms have a digital transformation strategy in place, with most of these strategies implemented in the design process. There's been a drive on trying to focus on upskilling our staff, for example, with draftspeople looking to take on the roles of BIM modelers as opposed to traditional drafting roles. Some firms are also using augmented reality to try and provide clients with a visual representation of their projects and to gain a better understanding of projects. In our structures department here at Knight Beasold, drones have almost become the norm for surveys and structural inspections, particularly for our mining structures, such as cooling towers or large conveyor structures, where it's often dangerous or difficult to access. So while many of our firms are open to adopting these digital strategies, we do have barriers that still exist to prevent the adoption. And two of them are, I think, the main barriers that exist. So firstly, it's the high capital cost that is involved. So many of our consulting firms in South Africa are categorized as small to medium size, and they can't afford the high upfront costs that are associated with the latest software packages or the technology and equipment that's required. The second barrier relates to the cultural and behavioral challenges that we face. So to give some context, in South Africa, the construction industry was largely seen as a silver bullet for job creation. And our Construction Industry Development Board even has guidelines that stress, the importance of labor-intensive construction. We have public clients that mandate that a portion of the works and certain projects are completed using labor-intensive methods. So coming from this background, there's a lot of people that are still apprehensive of using technology as they sort of see it as a threat to job security. So these are the main barriers that we face and some of the trends that we are seeing in the consulting industry. In terms of people, I think over the past 2 years, we've all heard the term the Great Resignation at some point or the other. And this refers to the trend of workers resigning amid the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it was most noticeable in the US, where resignations were largely driven by dissatisfied low-wage workers who had the option of quitting their jobs to rely on the COVID-19 stimulus payments that were provided. In South Africa, the Great Resignation looks a bit different. Our unemployment rate reached its highest level of 35.3% at the end of 2021. We also have an abundance of unskilled labor in low-wage positions. And this really meant that majority of employed South Africans were not in the position to quit their jobs anytime soon. What we have been seeing, though, is that typically the skilled workforce, which includes engineers such as you and myself, are the ones that are looking to migrate away from their current jobs, specifically in our main cities such as Johannesburg. So in response to this, our human resource practitioners have really had to understand the needs of the current workforce better, which now includes a large percentage of millennials, like myself, and Gen Zs. Our needs are fairly different to those that came before us. And, just from reading and stats, we found that millennials and Gen Zs value having a work-life balance. We value flexible work hours and find remote working quite appealing. So based on my experience working at Knight Beasold, we were one of the few consulting firms that had a work from home policy prior to the start of the pandemic, with allowance made to work from home for about 3 days a week. During the start of the pandemic, we were forced to move to a full-time working from home arrangement, which was easier to achieve since we had the policy in place. But this was not something that was common in our sector, and many companies were forced to come up with these policies during the pandemic and struggled at first because they didn't have the necessary equipment and policies in place. With the easing of COVID-19 restrictions, we've now adopted a hybrid work model, which involves working from home 1 or 2 and then coming into the office 1 or 2 days a week. So this has worked well because it encourages collaboration and more communication between teams that wouldn't necessarily be talking if it was just project related. And this seems to be a trend in our industry. Companies are also placing a lot more focus on mental health support, as well as staff well-being initiatives, also by providing access to third-party companies who offer professional services relating to mental health as part of their standard benefits. So that's the way in which the workforce has been changing. In terms of prospects, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding our industry in South Africa in the next few years. As future leaders, we are really hopeful that government will focus on infrastructure and prioritize infrastructure expenditure. We are expecting the following trends, some of which I've touched on. So, we are expecting more use of tech in the design and construction process, including the use of blockchain, big data, using advanced building materials. And I believe that this really brings a great potential for the involvement of future leaders in leading this digital transformation in their organizations. Millennials and Gen Zs are sort of synonymous for being tech savvy. And I think it's important for us as future leaders to upskill our digital knowledge on an ongoing basis and learn to adapt and integrate these digital interfaces within our day-to-day work. And I think it also provides opportunity for us to assist with developing a culture of innovation that that embraces disruptive technologies. The second trend that I think we will see is more employers that embrace flexibility, value diversity and inclusion, and focus on employee well-being. As the workforce is changing, the needs of engineers are changing, companies will sort of be forced to change in order to retain their high-performing individuals. And lastly, I think that there will be a greater focus on sustainability in our designs. We have many municipalities, such as the city of Johannesburg, that have a green policy, building policy in place that aims to have all new buildings have net carbon zero emissions by 2030. And for all existing buildings to be net zero by 2050. So this really provides opportunities for future leaders in the sector to take on the roles that are seen as sort of non-traditional in South Africa, but yeah, provides bigger scope for this. So these are the prospects that we are seeing and the trends that we are experiencing in South Africa. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your presentation, Nilam. We've received a couple of questions that are directed to you, if that's fine. So basically, I have a couple of questions mainly, which are, how do you believe clients will start supervising consultants' works in the future? How will they monitor their attendance or billable hours? And perhaps if you could tell us if you think these changes help the bottom line of consulting engineering companies.
Okay, sure. So in terms of, how will clients start supervising consultants' work in the future? I think we have a long way to go at this stage in South Africa for that in terms of construction supervision. Our clients, particularly in rural municipalities, don't really have the expertise and capacity to complete this. So they do rely heavily on consultants for their technical expertise. There are initiatives from government to professionalize the state, but I think we still have a long way to go for that. In terms of how will they monitor attendance or billable hours, I think with regards to this, there's sort of a shift in mindset that's happening. From that being based on hours to rather output based. So companies and clients are not, I think, moving in a direction that they aren't as concerned as to whether you're sitting at your desk 8 hours a day, but rather are you delivering the required output and solutions that are required. I think a colleague of mine also said, we aren't in the business of selling hours, we are selling solutions. So I think it's that shift in mindset to more output based. In terms of if the changes have helped the bottom lines of consulting engineering companies, with our work from home policy at Knight Beasold, we've seen an increase in our productivity and billability. So that has affected our bottom line. Some companies during the pandemic were also able, not just during the pandemic, with the rise of remote working, were able to downsize their offices. And this has, in turn reduced their overhead costs. So those are the direct ways. But I think there's also indirect benefits that can be achieved with remote working and flexibility. So in terms of the labor force, by having remote working options, I think we broaden the radius of your employee search as people are more likely to apply for jobs if there's flexibility. So, they wouldn't mind traveling if it's just 1 or 2 days to the office. Also, I think it gives companies the opportunity to market themselves in other places, even other countries, especially for things like the design phase. And you are really seeing this trend even in South Africa, where we have offices that have become these design centers for other offices that are based abroad. And this really gives you access to a range of different projects and clients and more opportunities for work. So I think there's definitely changes that have helped to the bottom line for consulting engineers.
Thanks, Neelam, for your responses, for your contribution. Our next speaker is Michael Walker from Canada. So, Mike, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. And thank you to Neelam. Actually, lots of similarities between South Africa and Canada that I can note here, but also a lot of differences, which is, I think, a lot of the value in having events like these to learn from each other. So similar to South Africa, we're seeing massive infrastructure spending. Lots of that's coming through in the form of grants, but the problem is a lot of the time the government, to get those grants out, there's the promise of dollars, and the actual delivery of those dollars can take some time and generally comes through in large clumps, which then causes stress to the consulting and design industry, as well as the construction side. So a bit of a double-edged sword there, but positive in a lot of ways and a challenge in others. And really, when I talked to my colleagues across Canada, saying that I was going to get the opportunity to present today, I reached out to them to try to get some different ideas of, what are their challenges. Geographically, we're a big country, obviously, lots of differences, but lots of similarities. And kind of a bit of a mosaic is kind of the best way to describe Canada in a lot of ways. So little pieces that are the same, but little pieces that are different. So I've got four main items I'd like to go over today. The first is a Canadian labor shortage during the recovery. Skilled labor shortage domestically is a bit of a problem. And so that's something that we're trying to compensate for, because in Canada, it's not really easy to offshore a lot of that work, especially with the climate that we have, different issues and design standards, as well as the regulatory side. It's not very easy to just quickly bring people in from outside. So we've been focusing a lot on upskilling local resources, whether that's through training. Canadian ACEC is putting on a number of courses, whether that's soft skills, business skills, technical skills training, and doing it through webinars is actually very convenient, especially for a lot of younger professionals or future leaders, just because the time constraint. Maybe they have young families, they have other demands on their lives. and they can choose the time that they want to take in that content. So that's good. FLMC, or the Future Leaders Management Certificate through FIDIC, is another one. We've seen more Canadians signed up this year than we have in the last couple of years, so that's great to see. And then other courses that we put on throughout. So doing more with less is a bit of a trend. Like Neelam was saying, we're trying to get that efficiency up, but I don't think we've gotten to the point where we're selling value as much as we'd like to. We're still kind of stuck in that selling hours, which I'll get to later in the procurement side. Some of the other stuff that I think this group is a great example of is the value of networking has really come out during the pandemic and during the recovery. So whether that's connecting on LinkedIn, attending virtual conferences, those are great connectors. The challenge with that is that you're pulling on, or you're drawing on, that relationship investment that you've made over the past years. So if we do see that movement in the workforce with new people starting, they don't have those established relationships. So the people that are in those positions, it's great, but you tend to erode those relationships over time. So it's really nice to see, we're getting back into in-person, conferences in the office, that sort of thing, because then we can build those in-person relationships again. But it definitely is taking a toll, and it is a challenge to move during the pandemic. So those are issues that we're seeing there. The other side of that is the untapped potential of future leaders in Canada. There's a number of skill sets that the market isn't really ready domestically to take advantage of, or I should say fully utilize. BIM is still in its infancy here. Remote sensing, I'm a huge fan of personally, but it is horrendously underused in Canada. It's almost like the industry or the clients are afraid of it. I wouldn't say consulting itself is. Consulting is a huge advocate of these things and big data and learning from these. The client systems tend to not be able to handle that amount of data. So I've had specific government examples where they're using software packages that are over 10 years old on systems that can't handle LiDAR data. So it's a huge challenge when you're trying to bring everyone into the 21st century, but a lot of the time their procurement policies hold them back. So and we'll get into that a bit later. Next one is never let a good crisis go to waste, which is one of my favorite quotes here. Winston Churchill, sharing that with everyone. New trends in Canadian human resources due to COVID. I think this is it's an opportunity that particularly the younger or the future leaders in Canada have really started to push on, because we are seeing that shortage, particularly in the intermediates. So people that are kind of 5 to 10, 5 to 15 years of experience, they're the unicorns. They aren't moving. They're happy where they are. If they are moving, maybe they're going to government or something like that. But they are pushing a lot of these policies. So we're seeing, pushing the flexible work arrangements that we had in their infancy early on, I think very similar to a lot of other people, but it's morphed into something very flexible now, which is great. Remote working, we've seen huge upgrades. Believe it or not, our internet network in Canada isn't that great outside of the major centers. So we have seen upgrades to those systems, which is very positive. Remote mentorship is another one that we've seen kind of blossom and come into its own. So a lot of the time, while there's a challenge because you're not getting those natural interactions in the office, you're not getting people pop in to say hi to each other, we're having a trend of a lot of remote coffee sessions. Or little round tables where they'll actually make a point of having 5 or 6 people get together and talk about absolutely nothing for 10 or 15 minutes. And it kind of fosters those relationships. So that's very good to see. And similar to Neelam, HR policies are becoming way more inclusive. So we're pushing, and we're seeing lots more on the parental leave side, inclusivity, accessibility. They're really seeing that, you know, because there's a shortage in skilled labor, they're having to go the extra, or companies are having to go the extra mile to attract and retain the staff, which in the end is positive in a lot of ways. You know, while staying profitable is a challenge, but definitely good things for the employees. Now, the bottom line on this, and the thread that's kind of been sewn through all of these, is the cost of Canadian procurement. Canadian procurement, in my eyes, is behind a lot of global procurement. There's a lot of policies that are, maybe we're making some progress. ACEC was working very well, getting some qualifications-based selection to go forward. We don't have the Perks Act in Canada like the States does. But what we've seen during COVID is actually a policy regression to take less risk tolerance during and post-COVID. So a lot of these items are actually causing significant increase in construction contract cost. So that would be, you know, actual direct cost. Needless to say, material shortages and accessibility of items, hardware is causing challenges. But that risk transference to the contractors and to the consultants is actually, in my mind, a very negative thing. It's causing a lot of challenges in Canada, and the problem is a lot of those groups aren't really seeing that that's an issue. So one of the big roles of ACEC, our national organization, is to really showcase that and say, you know, these procurement laws that we're trying to update are actually causing a lot of issues. And, you know, buying services is very different from buying a box of pencils. So it's an ongoing frustration, but I think COVID has definitely made procurement worse in Canada, or more difficult in Canada. Locally, there are some more, you know, there's little pockets where there's abilities to use programs and some positives on there, but all in all, I would say that's definitely a challenge that is causing problems. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your interesting presentation and your point of view from Canada. We have some questions to you that we would want to ask. When you mentioned about the Canadian labor shortage during recovery, I was wondering what is your take on who is better positioned now in terms of negotiation position, whether it's the employee or the employer in Canada? Is it an employee market or employer's market?
Yeah, it's definitely, well, I shouldn't say definitely. I would say if you're positioned properly, it's definitely an employee's market, where if you're properly trained to negotiate, you know what your skills are, you have the confidence, you can definitely go in and negotiate a great contract, a great opportunity. However, I think a lot of the issues that we don't actually have a lot of that that training included. We don't tend to focus on negotiation, you know, confidence, influence, all of that sort of stuff. And when used properly, it's a great tool, because then you know what you have, what you're bringing to the table. And a lot of the people that you're negotiating with have that training already. So I would say it definitely on the younger side, there's opportunity for them to, you know, read a book, take a course, watch a TED Talk, something like that. Basically upskill themselves, give themselves a great opportunity, because it is an investment in themselves long term. And I would say in that case, definitely the employee would have the advantage walking into that room.
And the changes you mentioned in technology and this relationship between the employer and employee and negotiation skills and the way that services are delivered in Canada also, Do you think that these changes that happened during the pandemic and maybe also now during this new crisis in Eastern Europe, do you think that these changes are impacting universities and education and, you know, course selection and course preparation and majors in Canada?
Yeah, I'd say actually one of the interesting ways to go back to the first comment that I had with the labor shortage and the challenge with quickly bringing people in, because the way that the regulatory setup in Canada works is we couldn't just, you know, you can't just bring somebody in from another country easily, for good reason. We have permafrost, we have some extreme temperatures both ways, so you know, there's definitely risk there. But what we are seeing is that we are seeing a lot of international registrants into the universities, which is a very positive thing. I think it's great. It's just the challenge is it's not a 1-year solution. It's a, you know, 4 years plus a 4 years as an engineer in training. So it's a little bit more of a long-term solution, but a very positive trend, I would say, in a lot of ways. Engineering schools are quite full, I would say here, but they are adding capacity as well. So I think we're going to see less of a domestic uptick on that. There is a lot of programs to try to encourage STEM careers. You know, women in consulting and engineering is a huge push here, but also international graduates is another source that I think is great to have all of those put together. But yeah, definitely impacting the universities there.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Mats Brandt Rasmussen. Mats, the floor is yours.
One moment. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the presentation, Mike. It was quite delighted to hear, because I think I'm going to touch some of the same topics in the European way or in Denmark way. First of all, I will start talking the diversity and gender equality, because that's been moving a lot in Denmark and the European countries because of the EU. There has been a regulation that states that parents like the father has to have 11 weeks of paid leave in the companies, and it has to be taken by the father and not the mother. And we are looking into a trend in Denmark where we are actually expanding the normal weeks of parenting leave from 11 weeks to 24 weeks in the consulting business at the moment. And it's paid leave for both the mother and the father, or the co-parent if you're in the LGBT community. So that's the positive way we're looking into the diversity and trying to move inside of Denmark on that part. This is also a new step in the industry. We're going, myself and my own company in COVID, we're going from 11 weeks to 24 weeks from the 1st of April, and it's because of the new regulations that is stated to be invoked in the 1st of August this year. So it's a step in the right direction of the, what you can say, the life-work balance between the mother and the father. And also in this, we're also seeing more focus on preparing the parent to go on leave, and also be preparing the parent to get back to work after the leave, because there's in COVID where I work, last year 1,100 employees left COVID, and out of them 68% of them was after coming back from parenting leave. And that's a huge workforce that's leaving a company. And as Mike, you also mentioned, then we need to get some new employees and get them trained and get them into the business and understand the business and our customers and our projects. That's a lot of time and work to do that. Then we're also seeing a new trend in Denmark and also the Nordic countries, actually, that is we're seeing a lot of investments in energy and infrastructure at the moment. Just in Denmark, we are spending 20 billion euro investments on railway, roads, metros, and in energy is I think it's 2 or 3 times more than in the infrastructure business. And all these projects that have been scoping at the moment, we are seeing them to be planned at the same time, to be executed at the same time. So we are in what you can say, there's a lack of coordination in all the tenders that is coming from the client side. And this gives us a little of a structural problem, because the consulting business only have a certain amount of workforce. And the clients is at the moment looking into to submit all these tenders at the same time and to be executed at the same time. So actually we're trying to work with the clients to tell them this is not the best idea, because all the workforce will be working overtime and will be working in the same time of period, and we will overlap in projects instead of have a more agile time planning for the projects and be moving maybe not in 5 years, then 10 years plan instead of it. So we're also focusing on that in Denmark, and it's also the same problem in Sweden and Norway. We're looking into that all the projects is coming in the same time. So we have a lack of engineers, and that's actually also mentioned by Mike and Neelim, that there's a lot of projects going on. That is in Denmark, Canada, USA, the Great Britain, South Africa, and so on. And according to research in 2030 in Denmark, we will be missing 10,000 engineers to projects only in the consulting business. We also will miss engineers for the contractors or the clients and so on. That's a huge amount of resources and workforce we will need. And prior to the thing about investments in Denmark, there's a huge risk that we will not be able to fulfill all the plans that is coming for the infrastructure and the energy sector. So one of the topics we're working on in Denmark, in consulting business together, is trying to promote at the universities or the short school of academic school for the shorter educations, to give them awareness about our business and our sector of an industry, so they get an idea about what we do in our daily work and what they can come to work with us and what kind of projects they can work on, and do a lot of marketing in the business at the universities to come up with a positive result on recruiting new young engineers into the industry. So at the moment we have a strategy to work on that until 2023, and then we will look back and see how it went, and then move on with a new strategy on this. We're doing that currently in Denmark. I'm spearheading that at the moment, actually. And one more thing with the lack of engineers is we're also working close with the clients to get them to understand that we need to have an international aspect on this, and that it is a good thing to include our international partners or international employees in projects in Denmark. It's a little bit old school in Denmark, so all our projects need to be done in Danish, and that's a huge lack in the client side, because a lot of the expertise we are using is actually from Poland or the UK or USA or Canada or the Middle East in some of our projects. So we actually have it translate from English to Danish when we have to deliver to clients. So we're also currently working a lot to the big clients to get them to understand that we need to do it in another language in Danish. So that's currently working on. So the last thing I will come around is the what now after COVID-19 in Denmark. Is the back to normal or is the new normal? What we're seeing in Denmark and in Kobe, where I'm working, is kind of new normal. We are, Nalim, as you actually mentioned, we're allowed to work at home if we want to. If we want to do it the whole week, it's okay. And or if we want to come into the office, we keep up with our deadlines and what you call and our projects are delivered in time to our customers, then all is good. And we are actually at the moment working better than we did before Corona. Our billability is much better. That is the bottom line is better. Our cost has been reduced and our quality of the work has actually increased. And that is in our engagement survey have been highlighted because of employees get the mental health and relaxed area to work in, so they're not been pushed by another employees or all the talk at the office, what it can be in the office that can distract a person to work. So actually at the moment we are looking into it as the new way is that if we want to work home, we do that. If we want to come into the office, we do that, because it's about what is the best for the employee, and so they have the best feeling. So it's also then also we need to in COVID we have to update all our leadership regarding distance management to keep all our leaders to understand you need to call the employee to see how they are, and if there's something they needed help to, if they need a chair for the office or a computer screen or a mouse or keyboard and all the things they can have in from our office to bring home. And also working in hybrid meetings, virtual meetings, we have adapted that as well a lot. That was actually my topics from my side in Denmark.
Thanks, Mats, for your contribution. I think one question that I would just like to ask you is if you think that the lack of coordination in issuing tenders has had an impact on the market capacity and internal labor requirements. What can you tell us about this in a few words?
This lack of coordination in the issuing of tenders has actually somehow had a negative impact on our backlog order, because it's hard for us in the market branch to determine when is the next project coming, what should we do resource planning and tendering, planning of the tendering. So we actually we had a meeting yesterday in COVID regarding that, because it's hard for us to do the proper backlog, and we are planning out of our backlog how many resources we need. So we have told a lot of customers, help us planning our backlog, because then we know how many we need to recruit. Because in our industry, we are not just sitting in a corner and doing nothing. All employees are working on something and can't just been picked out from project to do another project. So so it has a negative impact on our planning and how we will recruit people in the future, because of the messy lack of coordination.
Perfect, Matt. Thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna go with Masao from Japan. Masao, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo and Nilam and Mike and Mats. Firstly, I want to say something with feature. The presentation of all the members, interestingly, very similar to our issues from Japanese future leaders that we are tackling. And after my presentation, I'd like to ask some questions to future leaders and to all over the world, which are already given to Adam. And those questions are asking for kind of the solution by getting some ideas from all over the world. But surprisingly, we all have the similar problems. But this is how this kind of webinars or this kind of relationship among the future leaders all over the world is very important, I think, because even if you can get some ideas or solution, that's the best, of course. But even if we are suffering at the same time, we can understand that there is good teams among the world to improve and to improve the industry as a engineering consulting. And here I'd like to talk about Japanese trend of working style of future leaders. Prior to this webinar, like Mike did, we also had a discussion on this topic among the future leaders of Japanese MA. And in this webinar, I'm going to introduce some viewpoints of Japanese future leaders together with some suggestions. First of all, let me start with popular image on our industry, which is that we have a lot of overtime work, and it's difficult to systemize the work because features of project vary a lot, and project management depends mainly on project manager and the team. It can possibly be said that there is a flexibility of choosing project as a good point. But that weakness also leads to instability of obtaining the project, unless you are not a very strong project manager. As a result, in Japanese consulting firms, international divisions have had a lot of workload while not being able to gain much profit. However, recently, ICT technology, DX also, has been so advanced that gives us a chance to change the way of working in our industry. By utilizing the technology, we can systemize our work and centralize the knowledge to share it and inherit it. And by doing so, we can also look for productivity. Of course, through pandemic of COVID-19, we realized the importance of meeting in person, and there is still need for on-site work. But in parallel, ICT technology can improve our working style by making the good point of our industry to be really a strong point. Traditional way of implementation of project by team basis or engineer basis, mainly on site, can be modified. With ICT technology, for us to be able to share more detailed information regardless of the place, and we will be able to distribute the workload even remotely, which reduces the instability of the assignment and improves productivity. By taking its strong point with effective and hybrid use of advanced technology, we can work more efficiently and flexibly. In addition, I'd like to focus not only on general working style, but also on lifespan working circumstances that contribute to our family life. Some of colleagues who are under childcare are struggling in scheduling business trips, especially for long period ones. And a few years ago, one of my colleagues moved to other company to start working domestically during the childcare period. In Japan, it has been very difficult for both of the parents to keep working without strong support from grandparents or relatives. But now that the technology has advanced enough to reduce the difficulties. When we talk about gender equality in terms of childcare, taking childcare leave by men is often focused in Japan. Of course, the background is different from in Denmark. It can possibly be a first step, but in a longer point of view, including elder care, not only babies, but for our parents. I think it's also very important to prepare better working style and circumstances with viewpoints of family care. Now we can take opportunity of conducting remote survey thanks to ICT technology. And that technology can also be a great supporter for the existing trial, such as flexible assignment to both domestic project and international project, or diversity assignment, where 2 engineers are assigned in one position and work flexibly, such as one member goes to the site while the other member works domestically. With effective use of ICT tools for sharing information and flexible use of human resources, I believe we can get rid of the traditional restriction of implementing project, which in turn bring us the better life. Conditions are ready to change. Now is the time for us to get the ball rolling. That's all for my presentation. And as I mentioned, firstly, there are some questions from Japanese future leaders to all over the world, and the questions are already given to Adam. Hope there'll be enough time. The floor is yours, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, Masao. So Masao kindly provided us with some questions from Japan and Japanese future leaders, which we will, I think, address towards the end of the webinar. We'll try to split them among us here at the panel. Before we get into that, Masao, if that's okay with you, I have a couple of questions to you. This new way of work that's showing in Japan, just similar as what mentioned Mike and Mats before. Do you think that it's changing the way the traditional way of building careers in Japan, of positioning yourself as an young engineer and building your career for the future? It changes the habits, the process maybe, or is it still like it was before?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Before the pandemic, the way of building the career has already been changing, especially for the young engineers. And we can say that under these circumstances, that trend was accelerated because as was it Mike, I think, when it comes to the negotiation, the employee is on the better position. Yes, and now young engineers is trying to change their jobs or companies, so the companies are trying to keep the employees at the office. So yeah, and when that happens, especially using the technology or ICT tools, give a lot of chance for the employees to get a lot of information, not only in domestically, but also from all over the world or even other fields. So yeah, I can say that changes the career buildings.
Okay, so we have one more speaker with Arthur Brito, and then right after Arthur, if you could try to finish around 10 after the hour, then we will get into the questions provided by Masao, and then we also have a lot of audience questions. So I'm very happy for the audience engagement. Go ahead, Arthur, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you, Adam. Okay, I'll try to be on time. First of all, congratulations to everyone, Neela, Michael, Mads, and myself for the great speeches. And today I'd like to talk about the changes, especially in the way we work after the pandemic here in Brazil. And we have many trends like the virtual worlds, the entrance of Generation Z in the market with a different perception of the work, which is really important. Discussions about lifestyle balance, exponential development of some technologies, and other trends that arose. And I'm going to talk about some of them here and put up here also 2 cases, concrete cases about the Great Resignation, the 4-day work week, and the challenges that we're going to face and the future leaders are going to face in the next years. So what has changed in Brazil? I think that we can split this question into the first one is the changes in the way the modes of work have changed, and the second one is how we do our job. And answering to the first question, there are quite important things to say. And the first one is obviously the shift to the virtual remote work. It has always been seen at the entrepreneurial world as something impossible, even intangible, that would reduce the productivity of the company and many other problems. But the pandemic scenario changed this paradigm, and now it is a reality that the companies and the employees must face. We have no other option. And of course, it brings challenges that I'm going to talk a little about later, but brought many benefits, such as flexibility, freedom to travel and work wherever you are, and agree to work, since most part of the job is done digitally. And this is a general trend here in Brazil. Most companies of consulting engineering sector are adapting themselves to this new world, and it is becoming more and more natural, despite the resistance of some. Some companies have obliged its employees to go back to the office, and they're facing a great resistance. But in general, the companies are increasing their investments each year in their digital platforms and the security of their data. And those who are better prepared at the beginning of the pandemic could do a smoother transition and along the years, even improve it and increase productivity. The second point is the decentralization of the work. Since people could not work together, the teams were already decentralized, but it was taken to a different level when you started hiring people from different parts of the world, and the virtual environment is what allows this kind of practice. It is interesting to notice that it was already very common in other sectors, such as technology and informatics. And here in Brazil, we have a practice nowadays that is hiring people in different states. Brazil is a continental country. And just to give an example, to live in one state in Northeast, to go to São Paulo, it takes 3 hours. And in 3 hours, you can go from Portugal to France and across 3 countries. So even though we're still on the same country, the regions have different ways of working, have different cultures, and this has an impact on the dynamics of the teams. The third point is the lifestyle balance. People saw they can use, their time to do other things, and now it's hard to take a step back, becoming to some even a hygienic factor that could demotivate these professionals. And it is important to companies to understand the reality of their employees and promote situations and modes of work that fit most people, especially to the younger generations that don't see the work just as a means of subsistence, but a way to self-realization. And the fourth and last big change in the modes was the hybrid work. It was already cited by my fellow colleagues here. It's really a trend. It has come to stay, I believe. And talking about the impact on how we work, we do actually the projects. The first one is the need for technology and innovation. Since teams couldn't meet, they had to find solutions to overcome these barriers and find innovative ways to do their jobs. And this happened through the implementation and development of new technologies, such as BIM, big data, and digital twins, or even even through the existing technologies, such as drones. Just to give an example, here at TPF, it happened on supervision project, especially in the mining sector, until the end of the second wave at least. The senior engineers could not go to the field to perform the inspections in the works due to the client's restrictions. And so the younger ones would go do those inspections and record everything with drones, with 360-degree camera for the seniors at home to do their analysis virtually. So this is an impact on how we work. And the second one is the increased managerial competences. Managing a team in person is one thing, but managing a team that could be spread all over the country or even across the globe is a thing completely different. So for the managers, they had to adapt themselves to this new reality and create intelligent and practical solutions to manage the team and the work. So the use of planning tools became more and more important. The use of agile frameworks, such as Scrum, for example, to plan and monitor the advance was very disseminated here in Brazil. And the use of business intelligence tools such as Power BI have become common to control the advances internally at the companies, but also for the client. And now moving on to the two concrete cases, the Great Resignation and the 4-day work week. Nila already told about the Great Resignation, which represents a mass voluntary resignation and began last year with an exponent in US, but other countries are affected, such as UK, China, and France. And Brazil was affected by this movement, but in a minor scale. But the important thing is to see the motives of these that are mainly the low paychecks, the lack of opportunities of advancement, the feeling disrespected at work. So we as future leaders must pay close attention to these causes and try to learn with them. I like to say that a healthy work environment is 50% of you liking your job. The other 50% is the actual job. And we as future leaders must do the best to provide that, along with the recognition that people deserve publicly and financially. And the second movement is the 4-day working week. It began in the 50s and remained latent until the pandemic, during which it was brought up on the table, discussed, and put in practice in some countries, such as Iceland, Scotland, and Belgium. And there are different models, of course, advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to enter those here, but the main point is that reveals a tangible movement regarding lifestyle balance, and we need to be aware of it and know how to deal with it if it arrives to our doors. And here in Brazil, for example, this is not a theme widely debated, but we need to be aware of this tendency and know how to act. Moving on to the challenges, I like to point 4 only. There are many, but the first one is the physical distance. It was already commented here. Without face-to-face contact, teams can get too impersonal and can bring lack of motivation. And it is really important, this contact, when we talk about tacit knowledge transfer, especially from the seniors to the younger ones. And so this is important to put people together to exchange ideas. The second one is the personal life and work-life imbalance, and not having a clear separation between working space and living space can disrupt this, which can lead to stress and disease inefficiency. Managing diverse multicultural teams, since I have already said, this kind of team can pose a challenge if every person automatically follows their own way of working and interacting with each other due to the different cultural background. So the people management and the project management are really important tools for the future leader in the next years, something that we didn't look too much in the past, but now it is really important. And the first point, the last challenge I like to point out is the visibility. It is important to guarantee that in a hybrid world, everyone is seen. Those who go to the office and those who work at distance. And it's really, really important to keep the people motivated. Motivation nowadays, especially in the hybrid world, is something fundamental. And here, moving towards the end, I'd like to leave just one last message. That is, nowadays, talent is everywhere and everything is changing so fast. So we as future leaders must have a keen eye to identify these talents, to identify these opportunities and opportunities of innovation, not just to improve our businesses, but also our teams. So to focus a little bit more on people. And I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you for your interesting contribution. We're running a bit short of time, so we'll go ahead with the questions from Japan. There is some interesting questions from future leaders from Japan that I think will be open to everybody to reply to. So if whoever is interested in replying to it from the panel, please be my guest. One of them is that traditionally in Japan, people were used to working with one company throughout their professional experience. And recently, this has been starting to change, but not drastically. It's becoming a bit familiar. So the question is, how is the situation in our countries, and do future leaders exchange knowledge and changes skill by switching companies often? So I'll just give a perspective from Poland. In Poland, I would say the acceptable level of changing companies is about 5 years per company. So it's not maybe very modern, rapid changing of pace, but it's still normal to work for 3 or 4 companies throughout your maybe 5 even throughout your career. So if anybody wants to jump in on this question, please go ahead. Maybe Mats.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Adam. It's just similar to Poland that you move around 4 to 5 times through your work life. So in Denmark we're not seeing it that much as a challenge, because we know it's a fact. It just happened, and when it happens, it's just sad, because then we need to find some new replacements and and train them to understand the business and the projects. So similar to Poland, actually, it's actually our newest intro is we have some office in India, and we are seeing at the moment that an employee in average are 12 months to 18 months and then move on to the next company. That is actually more tough for us, because then we just get them trained to understand and work in our environment and then move on.
Okay, thank you, Mats. And Neelam, how about your country?
Yeah, I think it varies. We do generally see a very dynamic workforce where people are moving. I wouldn't say even 5 years. You would see 3 years. People changing jobs. I'm not in the same position. I've been with the same company for the past 5 years. But I think it is something that you do see very common in South Africa, especially in Johannesburg in particular. So very dynamic work market.
Okay, thank you. And I'll take one more question for the sake of time from Japan. There is a question about the fact that assignments are often assigned by the level of experience of an individual, and it might be hard for some new employees and new engineers that are fresh off the boat to get assigned at a prestigious or good project. And do you have any advice for your colleagues from Japan on how to position themselves to be able to get a nice assignment within a project? And from my boat, from our part of the world, I would say it's usually a relationship basis. So, for example, if you find a mentor within your company that's more senior than you, that you like working with, trying to attach yourself to this senior who would then drive you in turn for interesting projects is an approach that I would personally use. I don't know, maybe Arthur, how is it in Brazil? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I think it's quite a relationship thing, and I think it's interesting I'd like to talk a little bit about TPF once, because we do that as an institutional way. We take younger engineers and we put together with senior engineers in important projects, because we see that they are the future of the company. And so we need to pass the knowledge from the senior ones to those younger ones. And so those important projects, we put them together, we stress them in a good way to learn and to grow, So I think that's the best way to get into these projects.
Okay, I'll go to the questions that were asked in the chat box by the audience, and thank you so much for all these questions. One question is directed at Mike, because it's about the Canadian comments Mike made from the Canadian perspective, and it deals with the surprise of our audience member about the level of technology modernization in Canada. And do you, Mike, think that it has anything to do with this growing generational gap or a generational problem that you might see in Canada between senior engineers and junior engineers? Mike, what's your take on this?
Yeah, there's definitely, I guess part of the issue would be, and maybe I focused on the public sector a little bit more than the private sector. Public sector would be more of that risk aversity, and that comes with a little bit, I don't want to pick on the older audience, but maybe older procurement policies with or the way that they're measuring value. The private industry, I would say, is advancing significantly quicker. They're seeing a lot of new technology drivers. So in resources, you know, a lot of the private clients that we have, we're seeing a demand for drone work, BIM, virtual modeling, digital twins, that sort of thing. So I don't think it's as bad as made it out to be in all cases, but definitely in the private or public sector, lots of room for improvement. And I think it's just because in Canada we've become complacent in some of the projects. They know what they want, they've seen it, it's been that way for the last 40 years, and maybe there's room for improvement. So a challenge, but I don't think it's doom and gloom by any means.
Thank you. There was an interesting question from Saurabh Tyagi, which was, you know, what's more economically advisable for an employer, to hire a consultant that's built on resources and manpower, so I understand that's per hour, or whether it's a consultant billing on milestones or deliverables. And I'll take a stab at this because I think it's a very interesting question, and the good consulting answer would be it depends. And what it depends on, my advice would be, if it's a very difficult project that's non-standard and it requires creativity and an experienced company and with high requirements and somebody that you really want to put in the thought process into discovering something new that you need to use at this project, I would advise to go with the hourly rate, because it gives the flexibility to be creative. But this is, I think, to be very fair to our employers, it's rarely the case on standard business where you know what you want and it's a standard road, a standard pipe, anything that the client has experience building. Then I think I would go with the billing on milestones or deliverables. So thank you for that question, because I like the economics of consulting engineering is always interesting. We have a couple more questions. There is a question about how effective, this was by Rajendra, how effective has been working from home actually been, and whether we've experienced job cutting during the COVID-19 pandemic. So maybe I'll go back to Neelam for this. Is your company, you know, measuring efficiency, or what has your experience been with this efficiency of working at home? Thank you.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks for the question. So my company has been measuring in terms of, you know, how billable people are. So they've noted that our billability has actually increased with the change to working from home. At the same time, they have been a lot of companies in South Africa that have experienced job cuts related to the pandemic. I'm not sure, you know, if that's really related to working from home. Perhaps certain roles such as, you know, admin staff and things like that were, their roles were sort of cut out in the process of working from home. But I think a lot of effort was done personally at Knight Piesol to try and redirect these people to other departments instead of laying them off. But yeah, I think that it was an issue at a lot of other consulting firms that they did see sort of large scale retrenchments during the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. We have time, I think, for one more question and one more answer before we start to wrap up. And this is a question from Mikael from the audience. What are the conditions for employment in post-COVID, in the post-COVID period? So my understanding of the question is that, you know, how have your conditions of work changed now versus what it was before COVID? Has it returned to normal? Has it not? Many of you have commented on this during your presentations. So I don't know, maybe Rodrigo, you haven't had the opportunity to say too much today. So maybe we'll go with Rodrigo. How is it in Mexico? And has it changed, come back, or has it remained somewhere in the middle?
Well, thanks, Adam, for the question. In Mexico, it's something in between, because of course, with younger people, particularly the ones that have just finished university, they really like working from home and they don't see the need of going to the workplace. For older people, or let's say somewhere in between, they like the mixture of going to the office and sometimes working from home, particularly people that or professionals that have a family. They like to spend perhaps days closer to the weekend, not to say to have a long weekend, but to have some days dedicated to the family. There are some big discussions on whether it's necessary to go to offices or not, because some people think it's a waste of time, particularly in a big city like Mexico City, where we have over 20 million people and you have to spend a lot of time traveling from one place to another. But there's also a big discussion related to, I don't know if it was who was saying this in the webinar, but there's also the importance of knowledge transfer and engaging younger people with older people or more experienced people, to get to know the culture of the company, to get to know how the company works, to get to know your peers, because nowadays many people started working in different companies where they haven't actually had the opportunity to meet their colleagues face to face. So in Mexico, it's somewhere in between at the moment. Personally, in our company, we like to give the flexibility of having the middle part, where it's not fully enforced for everyone to be there, but also not encouraging everyone to work from home all day.
Okay.
So yeah.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Before we wrap up and the floor goes to Luis, I would like to thank all the panelists for all the work and preparation you did into putting this webinar together, and Lise from the Secretariat, and Chanel also, and FIDIC for helping us arrange this, and Nelson and Tony for all their support. If we could go to the last poll question that we have prepared for the audience. This is the poll question number 2. Do you think changes in technology and in the way remote business is conducted has lessened cultural gaps and increased globalization? If I could kindly ask you to answer this question, following all the comments made by our hosts and panelists. We'll give it 10 seconds. Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's a significant yes. Our world is getting smaller, and our cultural divisions are also getting smaller, as you saw from the presenters. Different countries, different continents, and yet you could find a lot of similarities between them. But I don't want to steal anything from Luis and his conclusion remarks. So Luis, straight to you, and thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Alan, Rodrigo, and all our speakers for what, in my opinion, has been an excellent webinar. The insights you have provided us with have enlightened us with and given a lot of food for thoughts. I think that we can safely say that the future of our industry is in good hands. And your hands, boys, so excellent, thank you. Thank you all again for your contribution today. Thank you also to everyone who has attended the event today. I hope that you will agree that this has been a truly event not to be missed. Speaking about events not to be missed, let me mention again the return of the FIDIC Annual Global Infrastructure Conference, which is taking place as finally in-person event in Geneva from 11 to 13 September this year. The theme of the conference is Building a Better Tomorrow by Investing Today, Sustainable Infrastructure Development to Improve Community Well-being. And the event will focus on how we engineer a sustainable future in a way that benefits communities worldwide. The conference will bring together the world's premier engineers and infrastructure stakeholders from across the globe, and it's an important international gathering for our industry. I insist. Finally, it's a presential event, so please come with us. Finally, we have our official FIDIC International Contract Users Conference, and also the FIDIC Contract Users Awards, which takes place as an in-person event in London from 20 to 30 November this year. Again, I repeat, like Geneva, will be presential, so another opportunity to shake a lot of hands and to refresh memories with our friends. I think that will be the first event in 2 years, after 2 years, to put together all the contract users community. Finally, there are many ways to engage with FIDIC, including events, awards, and industry initiatives. Do get in touch, connect with us, and remember, when the industry works together, we are all stronger. So join us in the way you prefer, but be with us. So once again, thank you everyone for their attendance today, and we hope to see you at another FIDIC event very soon. Goodbye, congratulations, and thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.